point of tonight's class, amongst other things, is to review for the final, but really the review class covers everything that you need to know to be a teacher, I would say. The material in the final, as you know, comes from the quizzes only. So if you study the quizzes, then you'll be well prepared for the final. And the material that you study in the quizzes will give you the essential core of knowledge to be able to understand the material in a comprehensive fashion, and then also to be able to teach it and pass it on, which is really the goal and the aspiration of being here, right? We're not learning this just for ourselves and for our own benefit, we're learning this to help other people. And that's the concept, and that's the principle of this, right? So, as you know, the only way we can help anyone else is to teach them. It's the only thing that Buddha can do to help us is to teach what we're being, and we're following on that tradition in those footsteps, right? So, as aspiring holy beings and aspiring and engaging in real bodhisattvas, it's our job, if you will, to teach other people and guide other people and help other people. So that's really why I'm here. So by reviewing this material tonight, you get a strong sense of the essence of what you need to know to be able to help other people. And ourselves, obviously. We have to help ourselves first to be able to help other people. Right? So that's really what the review class is about, and that's really what the final is about, is to get to know it, to get the essential meaning, the essential material. So we'll go through it, and it's not meant to surprise you in regards to what's on the fly. There's no problems making notes. Everybody studies at the last minute typically anyway, right? Studying as little material as possible in any case, right? So the point here is so that you know what to study, you know what the essential material is, and you can make sure you get the core points and the core meaning. Right? So obviously you should know the name of the text and the name of the commentary. It's commentary. The entry point to discuss. No. The entry point by Gyaltsen, right? And he was one of Jason Copper's primary disciples, and you should know his dates as well. 1362. You got your computer open. You got his computer open.
I'm not looking at the answers. I am now.
And Gyaltsen was a great, great master in the monasteries when they studied Gyaltsen's work. He'll take, in the debating season, he'll take 3 or 4 days, 13, 14 hours a day to cover and debate just one page of Gyaltsen's material. So it's extremely profound and extremely deep, and he's a great master in his own right. So in the text, when we start to get into this section of the guide, what are the projections we're covering in this section of the guide? Not being angry.
Joyful effort.
And
meditation.
Yeah. So when we start to talk about not getting angry, Jisung Ka, Master Shantideva and Gyaltsen divide the problems of anger into 2 categories, right? Problems we can see and problems that we can't see. And they say that the problems that we can't see are really the bigger problems. Right? And they're not so much emphasizing that you get rid of the face and you get an ulcer, and you don't sleep well, and all the rest, and all this is true. Right? But the principal problem that we can't see directly is that, which is really important.
Destroys all your good karma.
Yeah, I mean, it destroys massive amounts of karma. And by extension, you can't get enlightened. Right? It's not possible to get enlightened if you're getting angry on the regular basis. Right? And then Mr. Shantideva is talking about anger. Right? And he's saying, what causes anger? Right? I mean, is there any use being angry? What causes anger, and is there any use being angry? Right? I mean, it's a very famous line. Does anybody remember without looking at the NCTs or Just from your notes. Just try to sit with your notes tonight, not just reading.
It's like if you can do something, I'll be able to.
Yeah, very famous lines. You know, the message of the day is basically saying anger is useless. Anger is pointless. It's utterly stupid. You know, it's just irrational, dumb thing to do in a practical sense. You know, because if there's something you can do about it, why get upset? Do something. You know, if there's nothing you can do about it, why get upset? There's nothing you can do about it. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. So there's no use being upset if there's nothing you can do about it. So here's a location. And then, of course, people get into the mode where they say, well, it's too hard, I can't control my anger. You know, it's too hard for me to deal with my anger. It's, you know, it controls me, and I don't have any ability to direct it, or deal with it, or master it, or have discipline, or whatever the case might be, right? And so, Master Chandra says that doesn't make sense. You know, you can have patience even towards great suffering. And you know, he gives some logical ideas or presentations to support them. Do you remember any of his logical presentations around to support the notion that one can't control their anger or can deal with their anger?
It's a habit. You develop patience. You work.
Yeah, any quality of mind is a habit. Anything in our mind is a habit. Right? And anger is a habit like any other habit. And it's, you know, we may think, well, I've always had it. Well, that may be the case that you've had the box shocks and influence this entire life. That doesn't mean you've always had it. So he says the way we think of anything is just based upon how we become accustomed to thinking. We just develop a habit and we continue to go out and act out that habit. And there's no habit that can't be changed if you start to work at it consistently, slowly, progressively. It's true of anger and everything else. And you can see it. You can see it in our own lives with so many things, right? I mean, it's very hard to start. I mean, I want to go to bed early so I can meditate. The TV show calls every night. The TV is calling, saying, watch me, you know? And my wife is saying, oh, don't you want to see Breaking Bad? Oh, don't you want to see True Blood? Oh, don't you want to see Mad Men? Oh, don't you want to see that movie that I ordered on Netflix? And no, I don't want to meditate, but then it turns on and all this flickering, you know? So, you know, it's a hard habit to break. Even something like just watching TV, right, at night, instead of going to bed and having good rest and being able to meditate. So, not to go on and do that. So then Master Shantideva talks about even people who hurt us in an apparently intentional way, we can refuse to get angry at them. And say, look, yeah, some people may hurt you accidentally, some people may hurt you on purpose. Right? And, you know, it's easier in your mind, perhaps, to think about it and deal with people who are hurting you accidentally. But then, how do you deal with it in your mind with people who seem to be or are hurting you intentionally? And, you know, what does he say about it?
They can't help themselves. They're influenced by their own mental.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically saying, look, when the body gets sick, does the body say, I'm going to get sick now? And then it proceeds to get sick through volition or some kind. You know, it's not like we choose to get sick. And say, he uses the example of sickness and he says, you know, when you get food poisoning, it's not like you say, I'm going to go out and get food poisoning, and then your body acts out food poisoning and you don't think, you know. It says the same thing with people with their affliction. It's no different. So if somebody has mental affliction, it's not like they're saying, oh, I want a mental affliction now. And I'm really wanting this mental affliction. I'm really glad I have this mental affliction. And let me just act out this mental affliction because I want it. Because, you know, people can't control themselves. People are living their lives in a way where they're out of control. And so, blaming them for being out of control and unconscious and oblivious and sick with the mental afflictions is like in a way, it's the same as blaming your body for being sick with food poisoning. You know, and the body is not in control of having food poisoning, you know? And they're not in control of their mind, and they're having no afflictions, and there's really no difference. You're going to say, right? They're not under their own control. They're under the control of their no afflictions. So it says, you know, it doesn't make any sense to be angry at them because they're not rational people. Yeah, I know even maybe a lot of the time. Right? So, you know, if you knew someone, it's like you know, my daughter, she has ADD. So I remember when she first started getting homework for school, where she gets type you can't focus. So I remember when she first started getting homework for school, she couldn't do it. And then she'd drop her pencil, and she'd twirl her hair, and she'd look around, and like she literally like wouldn't do her homework. And I started to get really annoyed. You know, it's like night after night, week after week, month after month, sitting there for hours saying, put your pencil on the paper, you know, write this word. And then like, you know, not do it. Or half doing it, whatever the case may be. And so there's a sense of incredible frustration, getting really angry about it. Right? It's like, you know, she's dissing me intentionally, she's ignoring me intentionally, she's being willfully disobedient. Right? On and on and on and on, right? Yeah, but then I found out, oh, she has ADD and her brain doesn't function properly and she actually can't do it. So it's like, oh, there's a sickness there. There's some biological thing there. There's something actually going on beyond her control. And then like all the frustration and all the anger and all of the irritation and all the sense of, you know, I'm really getting pissed at this person because of the way they're treating me. It's like, it's done. You know, because, oh, there's a reason for it. And the reason for it is that she's not in control of her mind. Guess what? Let's jump to the stage. People are angry, not in control of their mind. It's exactly the same thing. You should think of it that way. You should approach it that way. Like they just, their mind's not functioning properly and they can't control it. Why would you expect them to not be angry at you? Because they have a dysfunctional mind. Just get over it. Yeah.
Did I tell my boss that?
Sure.
Dysfunctional mind, that's cool.
I understand your mind is dysfunctional. I'm okay with that. It's like illness, you know? I'll deal with it. I understand you're dysfunctional and you have an affliction and you're not in control.
It's funny because I don't ever think of it that way. And I'm using that, I'm being facetious about it, but I like had this interaction with my boss today. And I'm thinking this, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, let's remember this, right? And I'm like, oh, what did I think? Of course I took offense to it or whatever, you know? It's like, but I thought of it the opposite, like it was my own mental affliction. That, this is my, okay, this is why I'm confronted with you. I never thought of it like, oh, okay, yeah, you're having a mental affliction. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's always think of it.
Yeah.
I always think of it this. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But there's.
But that's how we go through our lives, and that's the point of what we're talking about here throughout much of this course is we go through our lives thinking it's all about me.
Yeah.
And then we're like, how's this affecting me? And we're just doing me and me and me and me and me and me.
Maybe he was.
He couldn't have been angry if he wasn't afflicted, right? He could not have been angry if he was not afflicted. He must have been afflicted if he was dysfunctional, angry, whatever.
Yes, yeah.
I think by definition, if you're not at peace, you're afflicted. Must be.
Maybe I was one.
Looking back at it. Stands to reason, actually, but that's it.
I wasn't really upset, I was upset.
But the logic works because we experience it that it's the other person. Like if we can't see it ourselves, it's like we see the person acting towards us.
Right, right.
A valid perception. Yeah. It's a valid expression of our own mind. So, our mind is experiencing anger coming at us and within us. I mean, if you think about the nature of perception, the experience has to be within us, or we can't experience it. So when we experience it as coming into us, and we're experiencing it coming into us, then we would say, you know, from the Bodhisattva perspective, it's actually arising within us, and we're experiencing it out there. So, you know, on the one hand, we're saying it's coming into us and we're experiencing anger, and on the other hand, we're saying, from a Buddhist perspective, we're saying it's arising within us and we're experiencing anger, and we're just blaming it on outer factors.
It was you.
The good news is it was you.
So speaking of outer factors and outer things, we talked a little bit about the primal one. Remember the primal one? self-existent being and the primal one. Remember those
One
guys?
with tentacles.
Yeah. So what are those two guys? What are those? You know, and the alternate philosophy, the alternate religious philosophy of the day was that things came from the creator being, the primal one, the self-existent being, right?
Unchanging. That's unchanging, but by definition, if you can create, therefore you are changing. So it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they're saying, you know, they're saying this original being who experiences everything without without relying on any other factors or influences. Nothing affects them, but they experience everything, right? They're unchanging, but somehow they experience every changing thing. So they know Buddhism says it's irrational. And then also saying that there's this primal one who created all beings as an expression of himself or herself, and who he talked to, right? So that's an example, just for that. Whatever it's worth. Given that we believe in God, typically. And you know, you can see these are sort of pervasive ideas through cultures and times and millennia. Right? I mean, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago in India, they were talking about the creator being, and the being that controls everything, and the being that has reign over our destiny. And you know, we're still talking about it today in a different culture and other cultures, and there's societies talking about it. So from a Buddhist perspective, we're saying, well, it's all kind of irrational for many reasons that we talk about. That's interesting. Moving away from self-existent beings, self-existent created beings, Master Shantideva talks about avoiding anger. Right? And so we talked about avoiding anger in a lot of different ways, but I think it's particularly relevant to talk about anger towards people who harm those who are close to us. You know, you can see someone yelling at somebody, yelling at their partner on the subway, and it's just kind of like, oh, that's rude. Then if it's your partner yelling at you, you have a very different feeling, right? It's more than, oh, that's rude, right? Your boss is yelling at you, your partner's yelling at you. It's not just this sort of passing casual feeling of, oh, well, that's bad manners. It's a lot more to it, right? One tends to get angry much more readily, right? Much more quickly. So what does Master Shantideva say about it when people become angry or try to harm people who are very close to his relatives, family, or teachers? What is his advice?
Is this the one where you imagine them as your mother attacking you from there?
You can do that.
That's some advice I have.
That's an appropriate strategy. That's an appropriate method. But that's kind of a general thing. I guess this is a general thing. That's fine. See them as your mother. When they say see them as your mother, that's kind of a loaded term because a lot of people in our culture don't like their mother. Wouldn't really help, right? Go ahead, see if I care. Good riddance, no.
It's a cultural specific.
We take it's more of an Eastern culture, right? Yeah. What he's really saying is think of the person you love most in the world, right? And imagine if the person you love most in the world, all of a sudden loses their mind, and tries to stab you. Would you just, take them out of their knees, or would you do something else? But that's not what the point is. That's a separate advice.
Didn't you say something like if somebody says something bad about the teachers, it doesn't, they're not actually harming the teacher?
Yeah. Well, I don't think it doesn't matter. We can go that far.
But it doesn't affect that teacher.
Well, so there are a couple of things to say. One is if they're an enlightened being and a holy being, no skin off their teeth, as the saying goes, right? It's not really going to bother. If they're truly some kind of high spiritual being, then do you think it's really bothering them that somebody's yelling at them? Obviously not. They would be a high spiritual being. And if they're not a high spiritual being, and they're not a highly realized being, and we're just talking about the teacher, then, well, it's their karma is ripening, and you're watching an expression of karma ripening. You're watching a manifestation of ripening karma. And so, don't be angry. No, it's not the same thing as being passive. I mean, it's an important digression here, an important point to talk about that. Because you could say, well, I'm sitting here watching karma manifest all around me. I'm sitting here watching karma manifest as a train wreck, and there's, somebody stabbing somebody, and somebody screaming at somebody, and everything's karma ripening. So there's no point in helping anybody, but then you're not much engaged with something. Right? So how does one, and this is just a little digression, how does one reconcile this idea of if someone is treating someone close to you badly or angry towards them, it's an expression of their karma ripening. How do you reconcile that? Or kind of align that with doing something to help you as a bodhisattva? What do you think?
You don't know what's in their mind, what their intention is. So you can't judge them.
Yeah, as the Buddha said early on, he said, you know, never judge anyone who will fall to the hell ones, because if you see what they're thinking, you see the expression of karma, but you don't know what's in people's mind. You see the expression of their own karma.
You see them as having afflictions.
Which thing?
People who are getting angry.
But you said in a practical sense, if you're, you know, I mean, make it personal, you know, if you're at your Christmas, we're done with Christmas, but if you're at the family Christmas dinner, and, you know, the relatives are arguing and pissed off at each other, you know, what do? You join in and tell them they really are stupid, because, you know, you really know it for fact, you know, because you've been around them your whole life, you know, or do you do something else?
Walk the dog.
Yeah, that's right. Go wash the dishes, right? That's a real question. What do you do? I mean, do you say, oh, well, is everybody's karma playing out, and they're all pissed off, and I'll go wash the dishes, or what do you do?
That's a good question.
In theory, try to do something, but in theory, try to eliminate the hate factor out of whatever it is I'm doing. In theory.
Our practice is about our mind, right? You can't change other people's karma. It's a very important distinction and understanding. Everything we do in our life and in our practice is engaging our mind to create specific content and karma for our mind, within our mind. Right? So regardless of what the circumstances, whether we're relating to a teacher, calling them forward or calling them stupid, whether we're relating to a relative, calling them stupid or trying to help them, you know, whether we're trying to help strangers on the train or ignore them, the point is always the same, which is what is it doing to my mind? Right? What is it doing to my karma? And so that should really be a guiding light in your spiritual practice, I would say. It always comes back to what is this behavior, whatever behavior I select. If I'm going to do A, B, or C right now, what is it going to do to my mind, or my mind, and in my mind, right? If I select being neutral, what's the impact on my mind? If I select being engaged, what's the impact on my mind? And if I select, you know, running away, what's the impact on my mind? You know, what are the influence, what is the content of my mind as a result of it? And that's really what all we're talking about. All of these practices, all of this path is what is the content of my mind? What is the impact on my mind, my seeds and energy and all of that? Right? So, if you look at it in that context, and you say, look, I'm seeing someone as holy, and I'm seeing someone as angry, and I see conflict, you know, fighting, or maybe one side has conflict and fighting, and one side is fine. How do you see it? It doesn't matter. You might see your holy teacher arguing with, you know, their partner or a student or whatever. It doesn't matter, you know, or a taxi driver. It doesn't matter. Or you might just see two family members arguing with each other. It doesn't matter. Right? It's an expression of one's own mind, and the way one engages them and the way one relates to them impacts one's own mind. Right? So the answer to the question is, I think, should be looked at in context. So, you know, if somebody is angry at your holy teacher, then how do you treat them? Do you get angry at them, you see? Because then it's impacting your own mind negatively, isn't it? And if you say, well, you know, my holy teacher looks upset and abused and like they're about to cry, you know, and there's just karma ripening, and he or she will have to deal with it, then what does that do to your mind? What does that fill your mind with? So you see, it's all about the perceptual event, isn't it? It's all about how you think about it and the content of your mind as you're looking at it, thinking about it, speaking and doing. Does that make sense? So, so what Master Shanti, here's the short answer. What Master Shanti Deva says is, look, this karma is ripening. You are experiencing the ripening and manifestation of karma. Right? Don't get angry. Your anger never serves any purpose, as you said earlier. So as you're seeing this expression of karma and this ripening of karma, they're experiencing, if somebody's being yelled at, they're experiencing the collection of their past deeds, the ripening and the result of their past deeds, right? And the person who's yelling at them is the instrument of that karma ripening. So what you do relative to those two people is the karma you're going to collect, and is what you're going to fill your mind with. So be very aware of how you're going to relate to those two people and how you're going to engage those two people in terms of your own mind and your own perception. Does that make sense? Okay. So, you might, just in a practical, simple way, you might, if you see a holy teacher arguing with somebody, you can think about it a lot of different ways, right? It's a perceptual event. Well, the holy teacher is trying to teach them something through wrathful means. Or, the holy teacher is kind of ordinary and has lost it and is sort of foaming at the mouth and red in the face. And they have an anger problem, Or you can think, momentarily. Or you can think, they're not much of a holy teacher after all, are they? They're just kind of an ordinary person who, wears pink clothes and, is bald and seems to behave the same as everybody else. So, what is the impact upon our mind in terms of how we're thinking and how we're engaging, right? And, if you think, they deserve it anyway. There's content of mind, impact upon mind, right? So it's just, what is the content of your mind? Whatever simple thought you might have in any circumstance. You're thinking, how can I help the holy teacher? How can I help this afflicted person? Well, that's very beautiful content of one's mind, right? Maybe I can help them both. Maybe I can help one of them. Maybe I can engage in some way which is beneficial somehow. Or maybe there's nothing beneficial I can do. I can't see anything beneficial that I can do. I would really like to help one or both of them, but I can't think of a damn thing to do that would just make it worse, as much as I'd love to help. So you see what I mean? It's not necessarily that you have to go do something. It's not the point. Makes sense? Okay. Okay, and Master Shanti Deva talks about when you do meet irritating people, and when you do meet angry people, that, be happy actually. It's actually a rare thing in some respects, because if you're a real Bodhisattva, and if you're really practicing, these people, you're not going to meet many of these people in your life. As you practice nicely, and as you practice more and more, what does he say? I'm giving you all the answers. You tell me.
You'll get happier.
You'll get happier, and what happens to the annoying and irritating people?
You don't see as many annoying people.
Yeah, if you want fewer annoying people in your life, right? I can attest. Fewer annoying people in my life than I had last year. It's very nice. We'll see about next year, right? Okay, and then there's a scripture which is used for reference, talking about respecting all living beings as we do the Buddha themselves. And this scripture says that we should treat all living beings exactly as we would treat the Buddha if they were in front of us. First of all, why do they say that? Why does the scripture say that? The sutra being spoken by the Buddha. What's the reason for that? They might be the Buddha, that's possible. Yeah. They could truly be the Buddha. That's how you create. That's how you create a Buddha.
But these beings are the beings that are going to teach you the way.
Even the boss at work.
To collect the virtue, yeah.
Boss at work.
Well, you're going to be able to collect the virtue, yeah. Like you could. You get so angry.
You're
So angry, right?
They're going to teach you about you. They're going to teach you what angers you and what you need to work on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, basically, and what's the name of the scripture? Anybody remember? Dhamma Samviti Sutra. In English is?
The excellent collection of Dharma teachings.
No looking at computers.
At least a little computer can pretend to look up on the
I was very obviously looking at the computer. I wasn't trying to hide
At least
it.
I did some method acting.
It is the excellent collection of Dharma teachings. And what's the so? It's a it's a very profound point, very important point, which is that everyone around us, they're considered the field of the. Everyone around us in the scriptures, they're called the field of living beings, right? The merit field. The merit field is gone somehow. There's still a merit field, even though it's not on the wall. But the idea is these are all sentient beings in relation to whom you can collect virtue and merit. Why? They are the ones who will be the basis for enlightenment. They are the ones via whom you will become enlightened. They are the ones that you will collect the necessary karma to become enlightened. Now, they push your buttons, they push you out, and they work on your crap, right? And as a result of them dredging up all of your negativity, all of our negativity, you get to work on it, you get to clean it up, and you get to fix it, and you get to be pure, and you get to be enlightened. So it's like relationship, right? Like dating is in a way easier, right?
Exactly what I thought.
It's 3 days, okay, he's paying the butt, I'm gone, right? It's like, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that, I'm leaving. Right, I'm dating. And then, then maybe you get married, you get engaged, and then it's like, okay, I'll deal with like a lot more crap than I would have otherwise because, we're engaged or we're married or whatever. And then you have kids, and then, then you have kids, and then they don't care about anything, and they just push your buttons constantly, It's like, I don't care about you, it's all me. Me. And then you're like afflicted all the time because your kids are pushing all these buttons and no one else pushes, right? So it's like, as you progress in your life, like people find the buttons that haven't been pushed yet, right? That's like, it's so like our life as a spiritual career is about like just walking through our buttons, like sort of strolling through the experience of having our buttons pushed, like day after day, year after year. And if we're a spiritual practitioner, that means we're okay to have our buttons pushed, right?
We're getting closer.
We don't mind having our buttons pushed. I mean, I'm paraphrasing Master Shanti Devi, right? He's quite those terms, but it's like we welcome having our buttons pushed because it's for our own damn benefit, right?
But when does it stop?
When does it stop? That's the point. It stops when we disable our buttons. That's when it stops. Right? When you disconnect the button, they can't push it. That's the key.
It's not like you
no
have
one else can disable your button. Unfortunately.
It's not like you have a choice though. The buttons get pushed whether you're practicing or not.
Yeah, and that's samsara, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the wheel of that's the circle cycle of suffering. Your button gets pushed, you react, you collect negativity, the button stays intact, the pushing is assured. And a lot more pushing of the button is assured, right? And so it's not until the button, you wake up and you pay attention and you get on board and you say, okay, the only way this is ever going to change, ever for all infinity, is if I start paying attention and I start deactivating my buttons, disabling, decommissioning my buttons, and saying, I'm going to deal with this so that it's not a hot button anymore. I'm going to deal with this so that it's not when this happens, I won't be affected. Whatever the affliction is what we're talking about. Shorthand for button, right? So it's just that. It's like, affliction all day long, maybe not, and saying, doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to upset me. Really, valid perception. And then you disable your button. Then you disconnected that button. And you don't have that button anymore. Doesn't matter what anybody does. You don't have that button anymore. It's gone. It's no longer the button. And then you have one less button.
And you don't get new buttons.
Well, it depends on you, doesn't it?
Right.
I mean, will you get new buttons? Maybe.
Yeah.
Depends on how you're thinking, how you're acting. If you get 2 new buttons for every button you get rid of,
It's more sophisticated, subtler buttons.
Yeah, I can't speak for you, but you get new buttons.
Yeah.
I got new buttons today.
Yeah.
I can tell you about them.
I didn't know for that yesterday, right? But I think it's also you get positive buttons. Like you get buttons that urge you to positivity as well through looking at them.
That's nice.
Because I think you build habits that trigger wisdom quickly if you've learned to look at them.
Those are called zippers.
So they call My only chance to do a serious answer to that. Thanks, Pete.
You have a lot of joking karma to wear off. You've done a lot of joking with you.
There's an example.
You guys.
So it's like there's a reverse side to the button where instead of red it goes green. And then you can build a habit. It's still nominal, it still disappears if it's not then with this thing that it can be a positive.
Well, it's a very profound point, actually, because everything is constant, right? Everything is perceptual now. Is it possible for what was a suffering input before to be a happy input? Can you change a button that used to be a source of suffering into a button that's a source of joy and happiness? Can the exact same stimuli, which was pissing you off before, irritating you before, become a stimuli which actually brings you some kind of happiness and peace of mind and satisfaction? Well, yeah, it's a shift in perception. It's just a perception.
It must be, I mean, that's the Buddha feel, like that's what the experience is the same now.
Yeah.
But with joy.
Yeah, and that's the basis of our practice. That's emptiness and karma and compassion and all the rest. That's what our job is. That's what we do with our buttons. I mean, if you want to talk about endless buttons, I mean, there are endless. It's getting a little crude now, but in terms of the metaphor, unrefined in terms of the metaphor, but every event we have a response to. Every input we have a response to. We think we have a thought, and we have speech, and we have deed, karma, body, speech, and mind. And the point is, and every one of those is an opportunity for a button to be pushed. Every single perceptual event is an opportunity for a button to be pushed for good or bad. I mean, it's a stimuli, for better or for worse. Right? It's a mental event, for better or worse. And so, to say it more precisely, every single input could result in positive, valid perception. That's what it is to become pure and holy and right. And so on a much cruder level, we've got to deactivate all these mines and bombs that keep going off, blowing up inside of us. Because as long as we have all these huge, coarse, crude, negative explosions, then there's too much turmoil to really work on a cellular level. And that's, I think Thomas, if you were perhaps alluded to also, and what your question was, is over time what happens as we deal with our major afflictions, do the afflictions ever go away? Well, the Master Chan today was quite clear, the texts are quite clear. You start to clean up your major afflictions, and then you work your way down the list towards the minor afflictions. And they're done when they're done. As you get rid of the major afflictions, there's more behind it, more behind it, more behind it. But they do become more subtle, and they do become more refined, and they do become more sophisticated. And that's exactly the point of the levels of vows that we talked about in the vow course. Right? You have your correcting moksha vows to deal with very crude negativities, to restrain yourself from very crude negativities, and you get good at that. And then you move on to Bodhisattva vows, where you restrain yourself from much more subtle negativities, and you train yourself in much more subtle virtue. And then you go on to the higher vows, the secret vows, which are even more subtle restraints from negativity, and much more powerful trainings in virtue and engaging people in virtuous ways. And that's it. That's the spiritual path, So, Master Shantideva is saying, look, when you have these lousy people in your life, use them well, because it'll be hard to find them later. So like that, right? And then, so the excellent collection of Dharma teachings is saying, the living beings around you are the field of Buddhas through which you'll become enlightened. Would they be Buddhas right now if you had collected their karma in the past? If you had collected the karma in the past to see everyone around you as a Buddha, would you be perceiving as Buddhas? Of course. The only reason we're not perceiving everyone around us as a Buddha is we simply haven't collected their karma. Yes. So for all intents and purposes, they are a field of Buddhas. Collect the karma you need, right? And see them that way. So you can look at it from both perspectives, I mean, if you had collected the karma already, you would be seeing them that way. And it would be that right now. And, if you want to see them that way in the future, collect the karma, right? So, those are the restraints. This is the ideas around the restraints from anger. And then Master Bodhisattva begins to address effort, happy effort, joyful effort, positive effort. And what does Master Shantideva basically say joyful effort is? How does he describe it, define it? What is effort? What does Paul say what effort is?
Taking joy in everything that you do.
Yeah.
And the goodness that you do.
Yeah, joy and virtue, joy and goodness. It's just being happy about goodness, right? Being happy about your goodness, being happy about your efforts to do good, being happy about your efforts to be good, being happy about your efforts to think positive, virtuous thoughts, being happy about everyone else's efforts to do virtue and be good people. Everywhere you go and everything you do, be happy whenever you see good people and virtuous undertakings. Yeah.
It's a higher practice to see someone like shivering on the street, give them a blanket, and think this can ultimately lead to my enlightenment. That's higher than seeing someone shivering on the street, giving them a blanket and thinking, wow, just simply, wow, I've really warmed this person up and maybe they'll live through the night. And
correct view, the latter thing, the thing you just described is a simple good deed. It's a simple virtue without any kind of view associated with it. So typically when we do simple virtues or just straight up conventional virtues, it's a habit, it's a karmic right, it's a force of habit, right? And it's an impulse, and it is a good thing, it is a virtuous karma. When you study karma, what makes karma more powerful, you study a karmic path, and what makes a complete karmic path, there are various components that make the karma very powerful, much more powerful than weak karma and powerful karma. So it's a virtue in any case. But our spiritual path and practice is about collecting the most powerful virtuous karmas we can to get the result bigger, faster, better. Yeah. So engaging in giving and goodness with correct view, with an understanding of karma, with bodhicitta, with highest view is much more powerful than simple giving. So it's a great thing to say, here's a blanket, I hope you survive the night, or here's, I'll let you in the subway so you don't freeze tonight. But that's nowhere near, that's a great goodness, and be happy about it. Just simply, I'm really happy that this guy's not going to be freezing tonight. I'm really happy that this guy has a warm, dry place to sleep on the subway bench. Really. Not as powerful karmically as saying, yeah, he gets all that, and I'm happy about that, and in addition to that, I understand the nature of reality, and I understand how things work at a deeper, subtle level, an ultimate level. And I understand that as a result of doing this, this is the outcome of the choice. So you have the one and you're adding another layer to it. So in the one you have the simple approach, the simple thinking, and then the other you have much more, you have that plus. You're adding another layer to it. And an even better way to think about it is going back to the conversation about the field of merit, from the excellent collection of Dharma teachings. The best way to think about it is I'd be perceiving this being as a Buddha right now if I collected the karma in the past. And I'm going to treat that like a Buddha right now. And I'm going to give this blanket to them just as if I was giving it to a Buddha. And I'll collect the karma from that outcome. To see this being other being as an enlightened being in the future. Because it's much more powerful karmic seek as you come to as a result. Much faster approaching everything.
Sure. Question. How do I reconcile that, when I do...
Sorry, how
do I reconcile it?
Yeah.
If I do good things, good deeds, and then be joyful with it to, like, the last class's homework, to say that, we're mostly lousy anyway, and if there's anything good happen, it's just accidental, so don't make a big deal out of it.
If you look at all the sutras, there's countless things that they say, right? All the different masters of the past, David, Gelton, etc. And you have to really pay attention because it's very easy to key into our own issues and take one line out of 100,000 lines.
It's a homework.
That's a homework, okay. That's I understand. However, there are lots of other things in homework too. And my point here is simply that we've got to have balance and we've got to have objectivity. And this is course 15, that's the art of interpretation. which we have not yet gotten to. And the Buddha said very clearly, take what works for you and leave what doesn't. Right? And if we have a habit, like in our society, low self-esteem is typical. It's quite common. They didn't have it. It's not less of a Tibetan thing, you know. It's very easy for us to say, oh, I'm no good, I have a lot of faults, I have a lot of problems, I can't do it. And we actually have to fight against that more than anything, I think. And so it's very dangerous to me to take a teaching that says, I'm no good, and to really lock onto that, and to remember it, and to give it a lot of energy, and then think, well, see, they're reinforcing that I can't do it. They're reinforcing that I don't have any capacity, and they're reinforcing that I don't have the ability to get to know. It's very dangerous, actually. So the guide has a lot of techniques for dealing with our mind. You know, be like a piece of wood. You know, do this, do that. Which, you know, I don't know how many there are, dozens, scores, hundreds of different advices to deal with our minds. Right? The mind is constantly changing. You know, sometimes the mind is too up, and you have to bring it down. Sometimes the mind is too down, and you have to bring it up. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So I can safely say that's not a prescription for me at the moment.
No. You have to decide what the appropriate thing is for you. Yeah, I mean, look, how could you possibly do every teaching you was ever given? I mean, how could one have possibly, and this is personally, this is one of the biggest problems I had when I started studying Buddhism, is that there are so many books, there's so many advices, and so many teachings, which is like, well, which one to follow? Which one to listen to? Which one to, you know, which one is right for me? Which one should I ignore? Which one should I take up? You know, it can be very confusing, and it even misguided in some respects. You know, and that's why I was so grateful to the Coalition on having these teachings and guidance, because it brings it to its essence and to its core of it. Always remember that the teachings are meant, all the teachings are meant to bring you up in your practice and your path. And you've got to remember what your frame of reference is, what your context is. You know, I'm trying to be a more virtuous person. I'm trying to engage in virtue 24/7, the highest possible virtue 24/7. I'm trying to purify all my negativity as continuously as possible. Right? How does this teaching fit into that? How does this teaching support that? Is it an appropriate teaching for me, or is it not an appropriate teaching for me? You know? And it's be careful about just going to classes upon classes upon classes and reading books upon books upon books, and just like jumping all over the place and say, I'll try that, I'll try that, I'll try that, I'll try that, I'll try that. You know, half of them may not be appropriate for where you are. Which is not to say they're not valid teachings. Many, many valid teachings, which may not be right for that time in that moment of your life, or for even you ever in your life.
So something I can know in my tool
something
if I see some, like,
right.
some...
Yeah. It's like, look, if you're getting too cocky, remember that you're
then
just
I can read that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, you see what I mean? So everything in its time and place, you see what I mean?
It's like medicine. You know,
Yeah.
if you have a,
Yeah.
you know, a bug in your intestine, you take medicine for this. If you have an infection in your sinuses, you take a different kind of medicine.
You just start fighting against each other. Start having complications.
Well, yeah, you know.
And
And you have a reaction, right?
then you have a reaction against causing suicidal thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
What?
Yeah, read the warning label first, right? Alright, so then we go into joyous effort, which is being happy. And then Master Shuk David, he lists 3 things that act against the perfection of effort. What are they? Laziness, which is what? Which is what? Layla, that's right, easy to remember to that. What is laziness? How would you describe laziness in just ordinary terms?
Not really feeling
Sit around
like
and
it.
wasting time, enjoying wasting time.
I don't feel that way.
Planted another one.
He says attraction to the pleasant feeling of sloth. Right?
Yeah, I love that.
I just like doing nothing. This feels good to do nothing. Feels good to just lie on the couch for a long time and not get up and not do anything every day. Yeah.
That's hard.
So what's the next thing then? It's what you mentioned, right? You just mentioned it. Feeling like I can't do it.
Oh,
It's too hard.
I'm not good enough. I can never accomplish that.
just
Yeah,
annoyed.
yeah. Right? And the third? spending your life on other things, being attracted to the wrong stuff. I gotta see a triple feature tonight. I gotta stay up for the few late night movies, you know. I'm too busy with my cafe life to, to meditate. It's all the ordinary things in the world which suck us in, which then consume our lives and our life energy, such that we don't actually ever do the things we're learning about. And so then, this is the idea of Buddha nature, which essentially guarantees that we can become enlightened. What is the definition of our Buddha nature, our innate Buddha nature? Remember we talked about innate Buddha nature. What is that? Yeah. So the fact that our minds are empty, joined by nature, is what makes it possible for extraordinary good deeds to ripen into the experience of purity. Right? See ourselves as omniscient in the future. If things were static, if things were fixed, if we were human by definition, that's all we could ever be. But the fact that everything is a function of valid perception, and valid perception is fluid, dependent upon how the mind functions. If the mind functions such that we have a perceptual event, where we go, oh, I'm a Buddha, really? Then we are. It's just like we have a perceptual event right now that says, oh, I'm John. That's a perceptual event. Saying I'm ordinary is a perceptual event. Saying I'm not ordinary is another perceptual event. Saying I'm wise or special or virtuous or holy is another perceptual event. Saying I'm a great saint is another perceptual event. Saying I'm a holy being is another perceptual event. Any of those could be valid perceptions or not. The point is as the mind functions that way, it is a valid perception. Right? And that's how we become a Buddha, and that's what innate Buddha nature is, and that's what assures our potential. Buddha, our actual Buddha. Master Shantideva uses a verse to describe how we should become accustomed to Bodhisattva deeds gradually. Anybody remember that? The guy. Go ahead.
Start off with vegetables and all the way up to giving an alms or something?
Yeah, it says the guide has said us at the beginning to do our acts of giving with vegetables in life. For the example, for my life. So you begin your acts of giving with vegetables in your life, and you become accustomed to that. Later on, you gradually be able to give away even your own flesh. Now, how is it? Is it just that you can like bite down and bear the pain? Like I'm a great Bodhisattva, so I can take a lot more pain than I'm an ordinary Joe?
No, at that time you don't. You're not attached to it anymore.
It's just that you don't mind. You don't get upset that you lose a chunk of skin, so even though it hurts.
No, I don't think it hurts at that. Oh, because you don't have the karma to feel the pain at that time.
Yeah. Everything is a perceptual event. Why do some people have nerve endings that work a certain way and other people have nerve endings that work a different way? Right? In our world, in our life now, there are people who can't feel pain. It's very dangerous to them.
Are you saying that by the time you get to be a really good Bodhisattva, you don't have any nerve endings?
Saying, oh, that's not good. Imagine that.
So, yeah.
Like I could say a liar, I'm not okay?
So, no, just the
yeah. So, the read between the lines here from Master Shantideva is it's work at the level of your capacity. It's a big mistake to do more than you're capable of without hurting yourself mentally, emotionally, physically. Right? If you engage in giving and the rest, and you regret it, it's a great non-virtue. Better to give less or not give at all than to regret giving. Give at a level where it might be upsetting to you in any way, shape, or form, and then go up. Because as you engage in the perfections at a tiny level, consistently, the karma ripens such that your capacity increases. And you happily give more, and you happily do more with the perfections. And then you happily do more with the perfections, and happily engage at a higher level with the perfections, that karma ripens. And has this, and then you can do more, and on, upward spiral, right? Which is the point of our practice, is that an upward spiral. And so then you get to the point where it's like, I can happily do just about anything. I mean, nothing's going to hurt me, nothing's going to disturb my peace of mind, value me, in my life. And high spiritual practitioners, And even yogis, even just yogis who are practicing hatha yoga, it's like, oh, they have control their autonomic nervous system, and they don't feel pain. They can go to the dentist without Novocaine, and they can control their body, and nothing really hurts them physically. And this is much higher than that because it's not even a volitional thing. It's just a karmic thing. The nature of the mind is that it just doesn't function to experience these things. So therefore, it's not disturbing ourselves. Okay. So Master Shantideva names two things which cause all of our physical and mental pain. What are they? What are the two things causing all our physical and mental pain?
Self-grasping, self-grasping, or me and mine.
Me and mine. Think about it. What?
And then bad deeds, like non-virtues.
Yeah. So if we didn't believe in me as a self-existent being, in mine, in my bits, my stuff, if we weren't so afflicted and attached to self-existent me and mine, we wouldn't be any negativity. And we wouldn't do bad deeds. So the fact that it's all about me and mine, my stuff, my body, my parts, my car, my apartment, my clothes, my favorite possessions, those are all the things which are the source of my affliction. If I didn't believe so deeply in those self-existent things and the fact that they are the source of my happiness, then I wouldn't be running around engaging in bad deeds to protect them or to get them or to not lose them. And the self-existent belief in me and mine and the subsequent negativities we engage in as a result are the sources of all of our human suffering. Mental and physical. So then there's this idea of, man up. It says, look, even if no one else is willing to help you, even if you have to do it yourself, right? Even if all the other beings in the world refuse to help at all, we should still help living beings, right? So why does he say we should be willing to do it? Why should we? According to Master Shantideva, why should we be willing to do it on our own? Why should we be willing to do it even if no one else helps us or even if they turn against us?
Everyone's under control of their own afflictions, so we don't help them, who will?
He said, look, the vast majority of sentient beings can't even look after themselves comically. They're under the mercy of their afflictions. They have no idea at all what they should do to help themselves, let alone to be kind to anyone else. They can't even look after themselves properly in an ultimate way, in a karmic way. They can't even bring their own happiness and the end of their own pain. So it's no surprise that they don't help us in virtuous deeds, or they don't help us with high ultimate things because they're just not there. They just don't have it, right? So therefore we should be ready at all times to do it ourselves because they have such poor understanding and poor capacity that, why expect it of them? I mean, it's kind of like asking a kid to help you do some adult things.
Can you talk a little bit about how you reconcile the habit of thinking that as a motivator? That we did the same about the angry person. The angry person that overflowing with a mental affliction. How do you reconcile that with seeing them as they put a feeling? And that juxtaposition that happens when you're trying both practices.
One is working with one's own mind, and the mind can only hold one thought at a time. And so, as Linda was saying, it's, what are you going to put on your toolkit? What do you need at any given moment to put on your toolkit that's going to work for you? To the extent one can, one should always try to pull out the thing which is going to click the most powerful problem, which is the highest view, which we described earlier.
Like with David and the
Yeah, and thinking I'm going to give this blanket to Buddha, which I can't perceive as a Buddha because I collect schmuck karma. I collected homeless, dirty, stinky, foul-filthy karma in the past, and therefore I'm experiencing that instead of a Buddha. And now I'm going to give this to this blank screen, which for all intents and purposes would be a Buddha right now, if I hadn't been such a schmuck in the past. So that's highest view. If you can pull that tool out of your toolkit all the time and use it, do that, right? But then one isn't always able to pull that tool out of one's toolkit. I mean, if we're able to remember that and do that, I mean, we'd be flying, really. But we're not. they're not able to remember that and do that, because that is a profound, powerful problem. So, in a way, this is like a shotgun approach. You know, that's trying to say, hey, here's 50 things to try. Here's 50 things to try to remember. I hope you remember one of them. You know? No, I'm not saying that. Sorry, I didn't say that, okay? I'm saying that. Right, well, personal experience, you know.
And at the end, he's going to say, come
He's going to say, no, he's not going to say that. He's going to say, no, when you get to the wisdom chapter, he says, look, they're all band-aids. All of these mental tricks, all of these ways of tricking your mind, all of these ways of thinking, they're temporary band-aids. They don't really work. You know, it's better than affliction. You know, and by all means do it. But just think about the influence of the situation. Think about wisdom. Wisdom is the answer. Wisdom is the solution. You know? So how do you reconcile that? Always go to the highest view, always go to the highest karma, which is wisdom, pure beauty, highest beauty, right? And to the extent one can practice at that level, always do it. You know? And the rest of this is so you can.
So all this confusion, we have to wait for the punchline.
First 12. Punchline, you can get the punchline since the beginning. You know, the punchline since course 1, I'll have you know, okay? Punchline has been well delivered many times. You'll have another reminder of the punchline in course 12, over and over and over again, every time. Much more directly, right?
So is the best way to generate the karma to be able to come from a place of wisdom? Would the best way to generate that karma be to do these 50 band-aids, or to fake wisdom as much as possible?
Yeah,
so also wait until you make it.
Yeah.
So in relation to that.
Sorry, let me say one thing. The text very clearly and definitively says, especially the higher text, apply yourself to wisdom, apply yourself to these things to the best of your understanding, to the best of your knowledge, and to the best of your ability. And that is the cause to understand the law. You practice the higher law.
So me being me following all this advice is less powerful than me acting like a Buddha.
Yeah. Exactly.
If I can act well.
If you can do it. If you can't do it, then here's.
But until then.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then that's the question in relation to that is the fake it till you make it. You still, how do you reconcile the valid perception of seeing your smartness self giving the poor, hungry beggar with all the afflicted? This is really what you're seeing. Therefore, that's the pramana you're having. Yeah. How do you reconcile? And you know you're faking, not true, not valid, pretend. Like your karma is colored with that.
Yeah.
As you do. Like I guess Geshe Michael gets asked that question in China. How can you fix a problem by giving a broken result? You know, so people want food. Yeah.
So it's all karmic, right? And so we can collect a certain karma for the level of understanding that we have. Right? Given the level of understanding and capacity that we have in wisdom and whatever, we do something. And that collects new karma, which increases our capacity. Right? When that karma ripens, it ripens as a higher capacity. As Master Shantideva, as we just said in the prior verse, start with potatoes and vegetables. And your capacity will increase, and you will eventually be able to do everything and anything, including giving away parts of your body happily and loosely. And this is a good question.
Could you not equally be saying, I know I'm pretending, I know it's just a homeless group, and I know I'm just pretending. Put that kind of word equally.
Sure. Yeah. But this is where training and education and experience come in, because, say, if one is well trained, one has an intellectual, rational basis to understand what one is doing. If somebody walked into the room tonight and heard this for the first time, and you said, "Oh look, blah blah blah," you know, give the homeless guy a blanket and pretend he's the Buddha and feel like the Buddha. What karma would you collect? You still collect a very powerful karma. But if you're just having the thought, he's a Buddha, I'm pretending he's a Buddha, and I'm treating, there's an element of actually doing it, you see? Even though you're saying, I'm pretending he's a Buddha, you are, if you say, I'm pretending he's a Buddha, and here's your blanket schmuck and buy.
Yeah. But if you're truly in that mode.
Yeah. I mean, if you're actually doing it, you are actually collecting a karma. Even if there's an element of not believing it, even if there's an element of pretending, you see?
That's why retreat works, because it's all in your mind. You're sitting there having moments.
You're collecting double karma.
Yeah.
It almost feels like you're adding in a level of selfishness to it. I'm not doing this for you, homeless person. I'm doing this for me. So it just feels a little bit.
That's where Bodhisattva comes in, though, you see? If one is well trained, and if one understands the nature of projection and the nature of perception, common emptiness, right? And if one says, I care about every living being, and I understand that my perception of the suffering of every living being is coming from me, and therefore I have to be kind, compassionate, and loving towards every living being.
So you are doing it for selfishness.
You're doing it for every living being.
Which is
Including yourself.
You have to be selfish to get
Right.
to become a Buddha.
It's
You
kind of like
you
the
have to
idea
mind
of-
so badly that it
you're just
permeates everything.
you're just extending yourself from just this one thing to all these things.
That's the exchanging self and others. That's why the
Then you've got
exchanging
to be
self and others is so powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
So you
not,
lost me.
Your sense of self gets bigger, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Self is not just me.
it's not a teaching for the general public, but you all are well trained, and you have to think, it's important to think this way, which is, where does the suffering world come from? Is it self-existent out there? No. I am manifesting and projecting and creating my suffering world, me and the things outside me. That is my reality, my valid reality. Therefore, bodhicitta is me, my bodhicitta is me and me, all of my suffering, all the suffering I've created everywhere in the world. So you can say it's selfish, but it's, there's countless trillions of them in one me. It's actually highly compassionate. To say, this suffering world is an expression of me and my mind and my karma and it's by my valid perception. And I'm the only one who can end it. I'm the only one who can bring it to purity and paradise. I'm the only one who can bring all these beings to paradise, and therefore I must. And therefore I must practice to end all the suffering and all the suffering beings of the world. Because it comes from me. See? So it's ultimately compassionate. It is a higher form of compassion than bodhicitta, to understand it at that level. Rather than think there's some self-existent being out there, rather than somehow change from the outside. It's embedded with wrong people. See that? Thank you. My pleasure. It's a treat for